What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Miyanovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owners Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! We have a culture where we've widened what's acceptable for males. And that's a major move of empowerment. But we've widened that inside of a culture that attacks itself over many different things, including maleness. So rhetorically, how can we move forward if we're not even allowed to have the conversation? If you and I aren't in this podcast and I'm trying to have this conversation with you somewhere else, and then we just get assailed with the only right way to talk about maleness is white male patriarchy, right? How can we move forward to, I would say, empower the wider concept of maleness on the left in America? Like, it obviously needs to happen, right? Like the idea that all white men in middle age are out there just cruising and it's the best and they don't struggle is complete bullshit. It's partially true. Like I was talking about with, John Van Driel, maybe an inner city black man, his suffering is at 10 out of 10. That's horrible. But there are a lot of white men whose suffering is at 7. Does that not matter? Because of white male patriarchy. Does that not matter? Can we not even talk about that? Can we not even discuss how we're hurting? Can we not empower the wider reality of males and male psychology? Can we not even step into that and put our arms around one another as men, not as just beigist humans who care about everybody? We do care about everybody, but can we not just stand together as men and go, okay, what are the male things we need to, what are the man related things we need to talk about to make this better, to make the experience better, to keep fucking Donald Trump out of the White House? What are the male things? Because we know there's a whole bunch of other things we need to talk about, but we're in this podcast because hundreds of thousands of people came to the front door of Liberal Gun Owners Facebook over a decade, and we've kept 5,000 of them because the rest were a mess. And out of those 5,000, which comes out of hundreds of thousands, I pulled about 50 people into helping me develop LGO. And about 30 of them really showed up for that task. And among 30 of those people, about 3 of them are females and a few, genderqueer, gender non-binaries, but mostly it's all men. And all of those men, Alessandro, the amount of problems that these men have, and they're almost all entirely white men, middle-aged, is unfucking believable. These are good men. These are caring men. These are liberal men. And they're in trouble. They have cascading problems in middle age related to everything. The internet, their mental health, their bodily health, their choices of who they're married to, all that shit. And so, am I not allowed to go, okay, time out. These men that are helping me are in fucking trouble. And if we're going to win against these issues, whether it's guns or Trump, I need to talk to these men as men. And I can't even do that unless I hide it or move it to the side. So go ahead. You said you looking.
Why? Why you say you can't do it?
Because of the static. If we do it more out, like in a general form, all I would do is spend my time, me and others, doing what I did for 7 years, which I'm not ever doing again, which is constantly policing the bullshit. Right? So on the internet.
Yeah. So basically, like, yeah. No, I understand that. And that is true. That is true pretty much for everything on the internet, in a sense, right? You know, and obviously this could, especially on the left side of things, could elicit a slew of virtue signaling and a lot of comments that miss the point and they become static and then they hijack the conversation, right? So I understand that. For me, is like, it's, you know, it's still worthwhile in a sense, because frankly, I used to engage, you know, I used to use social media to engage with people and explain about, you know, first it was, you know, the teaching program, you know, for the firearm program that I teach, self-defense, the this, that, the next thing, right? And then also, you know, larger issue in societies and so on. And you realize how, you know, you're always going to have the people that don't even take the time to read what you wrote. They read until the first thing that triggers them, and then they, you know, they shoot back. So at first I used to be like, okay, let me explain this better. You know, that delusion that when you present facts and you know, and reasons, like, people change their mind, right? That's not true. And so now I progressively lost my patience, you know, and now I really tend to disengage as soon as possible with the negative comment and so on. Like, and so much so that now I won't respond to people. I will not, you know. And so, in a sense, what we can do is having this conversation through the static. Pardon me. Having the conversation through the static and having more of these conversations one-on-one with groups, or, like, you know, in an environment that, like, filters those negative influences that basically don't do anything to advance the discussion, right? Because if you present the discussion like you're presenting it, and I still attack you, or why people, why male, blah 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 blah, like, I'm not part of the conversation, you know. And so, block, next. And let's, you know, I engage with people that want to have the conversation, not the one that are wasting my time and everybody else's, right? No, I know, I understand. Believe me, I understand. Like, if you know, you have less control if you post on Facebook or social media and so on, who engages with you. But I think it is like, if you don't engage with these people, what they're going to do? Post 3 more times and I'm still not engaging with you, you know, and then I block you because you are taking away from building the conversation, right? Because unfortunately, it's like, you know, if the issue is why, you know, if one of the issue, but like a very important issue, is white male patriarchy, we need to talk about it as white male, right? And to make other people like us understand it better, and eventually really focusing on the positive side of things, right? Evolving the conversation. Because, you know, there are plenty of examples of toxic masculinity out there. We need to have plenty of examples of non-toxic masculinity out there as well, right? And you know, we definitely don't need any more stoics out there. But we need to have the conversation, and just like out of 100,000, you found 100, you find 50, you find 30, we'll, you know, the impact that we're going to have is going to be variable, but it's still going to be impact, right? So, I mean, I'm saying this, and at the same time, I'm like, I would pity the fool to start this conversation on Facebook today. But I don't think there is another way around, right? And it might be part of my personality as well, but I don't usually stop and ask permission for things. Like I'll do it and deal with the consequences in a sense. So if you're waiting for the perfect medium, for the perfect time and so on and so forth, we're going to be waiting for a long time, right? So we're going to use an imperfect system in order to try to make the conversation more perfect, not the system.
When I said you can't even do it, what I meant was you can't even go on the internet and just freely start having this conversation on the left side of the political reality, because you're just going to get assailed by projection. So obviously I can do it because I did do it. I just took it into a place where I'm not going to do with it. And everybody has a line on how much they're really going to get the conversation out there with the goofballs. Like I just don't have another minute for all of that. But I'm totally up for having these discussions in constructive places with constructive people, and with some of the goofballs showing up. That's kind of like normal. I just think that it's needed now more than ever. Leadership in general on our side. Trump is just one of the reasons why. But I know that the men that I eat dinner with, or that I've been working with for the past many years, are suffering from a lot of issues relative to being men and middle-aged and dealing with the world out there and having to deal with Trump and nervous system and all of that stuff. And we need to help each other, right? We need to help each other, because these are leaders. These are thought leaders. These are men who can help. And surely there are women too. Surely there are non-binary people too. But there needs to be a language also where we're just like, how's your dick working? Or whatever it is. We need to be able to talk about that too. What do you think about, because we've been going for a couple hours now, what do you think about, we don't have to talk forever about this, but this is your bag, self-defense, martial responsibility, right? For a long time, males have been or were the dominant provider of protection and security for the kith and kin in the group. It's a long-standing tradition. Doesn't mean that females don't need to get involved in it. They sure as hell do. They sure do. Doesn't mean gay people don't. They sure as hell do now. But this was something that we did for a long time. And not a lot of men, in my estimation, my experience, are even attached to their martial awareness or know about it or that responsibility. Most people aren't, but men aren't. So what has been your experience? Like, is this something that you see? Do you see it? Do you even bother seeing it along the lines of sex, male, female?
Well, it's not, whether bother seeing it along those lines, but those lines are there. Like there is different. It's different in many ways, right? So let's start by, when I teach hand-to-hand, like self-defense, right? So, I teach a woman personal protection class that deals with a lot of the self-defense issue from a woman's perspective. It's a different context, right? And when I explain the difference in the context, the first difference is that when you look at it, I would say around, let's say 87% of male-on-male violence is derived from ego issues, while pretty much 99.9% of women confrontation are derived by a predator, right? Like, so somebody that, so you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's enough, right? Those are the main contextual difference for like how we prepare men and women for self-defense, right? Then what we practice and so on are very similar. But going back to the psyche of it, men have a tendency to overestimate their capacity for self-defense to incredibly high degrees. I say the difference there, like, a lot of women, like, because of nurture or nature and so on, one of their fallacy is waiting too long before acknowledging they're in a dangerous situation, right? And it's because, again, we are raised differently, so we tend to mitigate for different stuff, right? Well, with men, you have to do a lot of work on the ego-driven confidence that does not translate in skills, right? And so, the men that I see in class obviously have made the decision to show up, right? To learn something about how to protect themselves or their loved ones better. So they're already admitting that they don't have some knowledge and they need to get it and improve, right? So the people that show up to class already are a little bit more advanced than your average person who thinks either bad things don't happen to them or I got my gun, I'm good to go, right? But even amongst the people that show up to class, so at some point they have to admit to themselves that they don't know it all, we have a lot that are showing up to, to show off rather than, they're showing up to be reinforced, right? Now, one of the biggest differences between, as you know, I'm involved with the Liberal Gun Club, progressive defense training, and so on. But like when I teach exclusively for the Liberal Gun Club, so the students are all members, I have found a lot less of that coming up to class to show off, right? Or coming up to class to be challenging the program, the instructor, right? I have seen a lot of people coming up to class eager to learn, right? Again, also because their background is a little bit different, right? When I travel around the country and I teach in Liverpool, like there is a lot more of that ego-driven stuff, right? So it's definitely the worst enemy for men, right? And again, a lot of it comes from insecurity, right? When I go to the range, I know that there are going to be students that may even shoot better than me if they have experience and practice and so on. I know that if I go, I teach mostly defensive-based skills. So I know that if I go to a competition, I'm going to not do as well as many other people, right? And I'm cool with it because my context of application is different. I prefer one. By and large, a lot of people, like, gear is a substitute for skills, right? We go back to how you appear is a substitute for skill. So when I see somebody that comes to a pistol class with freaking plate carrier, camo stuff, and so on, I already know. I mean, you do that for a living and, you're taking a civilian class, cool. But otherwise, right? I know you, bro. I know you. And part of it, again, I'm not, it's a white brush that I'm painting with, right? Because a lot of people just like gear. Like, if you look at the camping gear that I have, I would fall in the same, I can climb Mount Everest with the camping gear that I have and I go hiking, you know what I mean? So I'm not, some people have a passion for things and so that, but when you shop in a certain way and you present yourself in a certain way, right? Now I know you really well. Right. So there is a lot of overcompensating, right, in the male training world, and the worst kind of overcompensating is like, I don't need that. I shot squirrels since I was 2, or I was in a fight in my 20s and I kicked the guy's ass, so I'm good to go. So again, what I tell my students, right, you need to be clear with yourself, right, about your skill set, about your capacity, right? And like anything, like I don't know crap about radio, so radio comes. So I'm having a friend do a little PowerPoint presentation, and then it's gonna come and do a little class, and I'm gonna learn, right? I can't expect to know, like I can't, when it shows up, I can't be like freaking decked out with like, the free antenna for the scrambler thing, this, that, where I don't know how to program the radio, right? So let's take the steps that we need to take. And unfortunately, to develop skills, it takes time and repetition, right? But it's oftentimes that men use developing their self-defense skills as a bound, as a counterbalance for their insecurities. It is also true that people become really good at that. But if it's a counterbalance for your insecurity, now your emotional side comes into question, right? Are you going to use those skills only when necessary, or are you going to, or you can't wait to use those skills to reinforce the idea you have about yourself, right? So there is a lot of nuance, there is a lot of variables, right? But by and large, it's the reverse of an addiction, right? You need to, argue yourself an addiction. You need to first realize you have a problem. Number 2, you need to want to solve the problem. Number 3, you need to put in the work to solve the problem, right? If your problem is you don't think you're going to be able, you're not confident in your self-efficacy to protect yourself and your loved one, you need to do the work. You can't cut the work by buying better gear or looking like a cool guy, right? You need to do the work, and it's humbling to do the work, right? So can your ego take that moment, those various moments of humbleness in order to become better, or you need to find an excuse why you failed? Is it really the sights on the gun that make you miss? Right? And like me, for once, I try to make it very, very clear at the beginning of class, right? Like we say things like, well, like training is a learning environment, right? You're here to learn. Then you go home and you practice, and that will determine how good you become at it, right? Like today, you're not going to be learning and becoming the best at it because we're missing a key component on skill development, which is time and repetition. So are you open to fail and to build from that, right? And today is not about you shooting better than him or her shooting better than you. It's about you at 5 p.m. shooting better than you at 8 a.m. when you showed up, right? Skills is an individual trait, proficiency, it's a subjective and individual trait, right? If you come to my class and you have a fused elbow and your wrist doesn't have range of motion and so on, your sense of self-efficacy, is going to be you being able to adapt and get defensively accurate hits. It's not you having to shoot as fast as everybody else, right? And the reverse is true. If you come to class, right, and you're somebody with a lot of experience, a competition shooter, like taking other classes, you're showing up to class, you already have the best shooter on the line, right? So in order for you to get better and to get a return on your investment, you need to be a better shooter than when you showed up this morning. So focus on yourself, focus on your skill. Don't be too harsh on yourself, and don't take satisfaction by the person next to you that's doing worse, right? Because that's a fool's satisfaction. And so we try to make it more of an individual thing. We try to make it more of like, again, like why you're learning this skill? You're learning this skill because you're insecure, or you're learning this skill because you want to be net positive for the people around you. And so, yeah, and again, sometimes, the same thing, like some students, when they're not getting something and so on, some students may react better to friendly approach. Some students may react better to a more direct approach, right? But that's based on the student, right? So, and some students react better to like explain it in a different way so they can understand it, right? Because we'll communicate different. So there is so much that goes into it, and so much of the reticence of men actually showing up to class is admitting to themselves that they wouldn't be able to defend themselves with a loved one right now. So that's a big thing. That's a big admission to make, right? But again, if you don't recognize the problem first, you can't fix it.
I'll make sure in case Rob listens, I'll make sure I edit out the friendly approach part.
growth.
You don't want to have that argument for the 500 millionth time.
Again, right? Yeah. It's not like the body of research about how people learn more efficiently is out there, right?
Well, so we're all the way back to, it seems better to the Homo sapien brain to be able to project that you're Johnny on the spot and you know what's up and you can handle shit more than you actually knowing how to do that. It seems beneficial because across the board, the male ego loves that. It loves that little move. Just doesn't, if you, let's say we did go Mad Max and everything crumbled. The groups that had these men that were blustery and were all talk and no skill, those groups would die out. And the groups with the guys with the skill would die out. Right? It's pretty simple. As soon as the bigger picture comes in, the actual reality comes in, that shit with exaggerating your ego relative to competency would fall apart. The thing is, we don't live in a world like that that's getting checked like that. You can get away with being on the internet and blah, blah, blah. Nobody's checking your shit.
If I may add something to that, right? So it has been interesting because it's been my observation that when I'm in circle of people that have skills that are far superior than mine, right? I was lucky enough to be, involved in a couple of projects, both for training and then, for commerce with really tier one people, right? And I kid you not, it was amazing. The most humble and least self-projecting ego around, right? So much so that with my friends and some were commenting because we were both involved in the tactical world on the civilian side, and dude, it's like there are so many John Wicks and John Rambos out there, right? That it's amazing. Everybody's like, oh. And then we hang out with these people and they're all like, and you realize why, right? Like their sense of self-efficacy is 100% developed. They know what they can do. They've been there, they've done that. Their level of response efficacy, same way, right? And because at those levels, everybody's a freaking 100%, you're not going to boast about, what you can do because everybody else there can do it as well as you, right? And so it was refreshing to be in an environment where it was like the skill level was 1,000% and the ego was like at the right level, right? And you see people that have been through stuff like that, usually the humor is self-deprecating. They never aggrandize themselves. They most often talk about other people's stories, right? So that's, people that they have a good understanding of the relation between their capacity and their expectations, right? In a sense. And so, it's like people that come to class and they're I don't want to do it wrong. I was thinking, dude, you're in class. You make the mistakes here, right? It's a learning experience. There's no judgment. You need to do the work. And I think that a lot of the onus of that is on the instructors, is on the people presenting the training, right? Is on the people, not using that instruction and that training again as self-aggrandizing or to feel avoiding their ego, but to be there with that purpose that is driven by passion, right? Going back to that, but it's a purpose. Like, I want to make you better prepared to defend yourself or your loved one this evening, right? And incrementally.
Just as an aside, we don't have to talk about it, but I remember first class that I took with Derek during the certification weekend that I had, when we moved into sightless fire, and he was like, do not use your fucking sights because I will be able to tell immediately when you're using your sights. And you could look down the line and tell which dudes were using their sights. And then he would remind people of that And some of these dudes just would not let go. They were so concerned with how tight their groups were and everybody else looking at their targets that they had these incredibly tight groups, right? Even though the whole day was about spread your group out, you got to go faster, right? Some of these dudes, they would just not fucking let go.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Again, and again, it goes back into the psychology thing and so on, right? People that the least amount of control growing up, they need the most amount of control now, right? So that, again, there's no judgment necessarily, but there are observations, and I kid you not, I always tell this story, and this actually was a female shooter, friend, she's in CrossFit, Krav Maga, switched on, right? And so I knew she had good skills. We would teach sometime with another instructor. It was the first time she came to take one of my classes, right? And, the first one, I stand touch press, both eyes open, focusing on the thread, boom. And she hits it like, say, if this is the target, she puts the hole a little bit here. And then on the up and module, boom, 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 boom. And like the hole over here gets bigger and bigger. Like it's a super tight group, but it's high and left, right? And I'm looking, I'm spending like freaking 3 or 4 other iterations to figure out why is she shooting. The stance is good, the grip is good, the trigger is not right. And so finally I asked her, hey, I was like, I'm trying to figure out why your eye on left. And I get, oh no, my first shot went there. So I was just trying to keep it pretty, right? So, and, fair enough, right? But that's not necessarily the purpose. So that, but so little things like that. And yeah, people have a really hard time failing in front of other people, right? But again, as an instructor, you present it as an opportunity. You want to try to switch the conversation. That it's an opportunity for learning, right? And like I had another example. Again, the balance of and precision, big target, right? You call the up command on the big target a bunch of times. I had 2 guys that were high-level competition shooter, really nice people, right? We could have a good party building conversation. And so I'm going to the up, and then I call a number, right? And they both miss the number by this much, literally, right? So I said, hey guys, so let me ask you this. If I had bet you $100 at the beginning of the day that you would miss those numbers from 5 yards, you would have taken that bet, right? Yeah, all day. I can get that number all day long, right? But what had happened? They did not adapt from shooting a big target so faster to slowing down to get the hit. So the technique was there. They just pressed the trigger at the same speed, so they missed it, right? And that was a big learning moment for them, right? But you need to allow yourself to mess up, or you need to create those opportunities for them to miss and then normalize it, right? So that then we can build instead of them feeling insecure and now they have to do, whatever.
Yeah, it's a stranglehold, almost like the ego has a tremendous stranglehold often. And it gets displayed just how reinforced it is when you're in the grinder of a more technical, framework, right? Where they have to perform in a certain way. Otherwise you're going to be able to see it. Because all the truth is like the truth of the ego is right there on the paper. So yeah. I just have one more question. If you have more time for just like one short question, okay.
Yeah.
So, you're looking at the way the world is. We started off with this. It's alarming. It's concerning for you. Men who are in the center to left reality. Should they be thinking about self-defense? Should they be? I'm just going to say, I think we would both agree that we would both say all people should always be thinking about that at all times. That's the baseline. But now, specifically, should men be thinking about that now, perhaps more than before?
I believe so, right? I think learning good skills is never bad in a sense. But when we're talking about the particular historical moment, I believe so, right? Especially on our side of things, because unfortunately, the specter of a descent into a more authoritarian system. And if everything else fails, I think we need to be able to offset that view. And unfortunately, as we've seen in history and so on, having the capacity not only to speak your word, but defend your right to speak your word is important, right? And again, in the political discourse, like all this talk on the right about civil war, about this, about that, has had the opportunity to develop as like it's free, right? The liberals don't have guns. Like, if you want it, we can take it, right? So I do believe that in this case, a armed society is a more polite society, right? If one side is aware that the other is prepared to defend themselves, we may stick to the civics, to the laws, to the courts, instead of trying to accelerate something because we think it's going to be an easy win, right? Personally, I come from, if you want to drill a little bit deeper, but I come to teaching self-defense from a non-violent philosophy, right? Growing up and so on, traveled this and that, and studied different religion, philosophies and so on. And I do believe that, ultimately you do conquer hatred with love. Like you can't conquer hatred with hatred. But at the same time, we need to make a differentiation, right? I think nonviolent movements, nonviolent and peaceful protest is important for societal change. It is less effective for interpersonal violence, right? When you want to attack me outside the restaurant, I don't have time to convert you, right? And I need to protect myself, right? So, but a lot of independent movements, a lot of the rights were won by peaceful protest, right? But when the time arrives where the narrative is, hey, we are ready to use violence to get what we want, then I need to be ready to be prepared to defend it. And obviously, not only that, I think, emergency medical skills are very important, right? Self-defense goes hand in hand with the ability to fix something, right? Because if you're using violence, chances are violence is being used against you or your loved one. So if something happened to you or your loved one, you need to be, there's no point if you shoot the bad guy, but can stop the bleeding of your wife, right? So you need to bring them both together. And again, the more we learn, so I'm sure you're familiar with, what self-efficacy is, right? The sense that we are able to respond effectively to whatever problem we have at hand, right? Response efficacy is the belief that the responses you've learned for that problem will work. Self-efficacy is the belief that you will be able to apply those responses, right? So let's say you're an average person, you live with your family, you have a couple of kids and so on. If you learn new skills, like if you learn how to defend yourself and your loved one proficiently, and you never have to use it, that will have improved your sense of self-efficacy, your confidence, right? Improving your confidence in your ability to confront problem is good for your mindset, right? It's going to be good in every field of your life. So mindset is an habitual way in which we see and interpret life around us, right? A mindset is based on our experiences, right? So if I never learn to defend myself and I see a bad guy, my mental process and so on are going to go a certain direction. More likely than not, they're going to make me feel less prepared. Therefore, my response efficacy is going to diminish. Therefore, I'm going to be in a victim mindset. If I'm confronted by somebody and I know I can defend myself, now how I deal with that person is on equal ground. It's an equal standing, right? That confidence that I have will allow me to present my argument better or to stand up stronger for my belief system. And that's why, like when I teach classes, generally speaking, I prefer to teach the hard skills first, and then the de-escalation, the verbal technique, the psychology of it. Because if you're focusing just on the de-escalation technique, the verbal judo, as they say, and that fails or is about to fail, now my confidence in using my verbal judo is not going to be good, right? And the other person is going to recognize that. But if I know that if my verbal diffusion, if my avoidance skills fails, I can still take care of the problem physically, mindset, right? How I communicate is going to be different if I'm confident, right? We know communication is like around 10% the words that I'm using, 30% is your body language. 30% is your tone, and the rest is your body language, right? So if I don't know that I can defend myself effectively, my tone and body language is going to be different than if I know that I can defend myself effectively. And that transfers into all areas of your life. Like knowing that if you are in a car crash and something happens to your loved one, you can have some agency there, you can fix something, it's going to work on your self-confidence. And confidence is not just in one part of your life. Confidence affects your mindset, right? Your mindset is based on your experience. You improve your ability, your experience changes, your mindset changes. But you have to do the work, right? And so, I mean, I may be biased, but I do believe everybody should be able to have the skills necessary to defend themselves and their loved ones, to fix themselves and their loved ones if an accident happens. Like going forward is very important. And, you know, obviously we're focusing this on the male peer groups, right? It's important to go out there and be supportive of each other. It's important to understand that we all have, you know, failing and successes, but as long as you're trying to better yourself, that's a success already, right? And the things that you may not have confidence in, if you find your community, if you build your community, if you implement certain things, you don't need to feel less than or less confident. Like, what I'm saying is, like, I know I'm pretty, you know, in my peer group, in my mutual aid society that they're building and so on, I know that I'm pretty good on the tactical skills and so on. But I know that I'm not good on radio. I know that this guy has a lot more experience on the medical, right? I find any opportunity to learn, to better myself, enjoyable and a net positive. I don't see it as a threat to my ego. So remember, if you're creating a community, you're in the community to build it out. Everybody needs to accept everybody else's shortcoming and best skills and work with them, right? It's not easy, but like anybody, I think even the most, let's say even the most insecure people feels better than somebody else at times, right? And it may not be based on reality and so on, it's just a feeling. So let's identify, you know, our fear, our purpose shortcomings. Let's identify how to make them better. Let's talk about it with friends. Let's talk about it with peers, right? So there is a lot of work that we need to do with ourselves. And then there is a lot of that work that can expand to the group, right? Expand to your friends. But it's important to first go at it with sincerity, right? And acceptance more towards you, right? When we have a friend that confides in us some shortcomings, some bad things and so on, we extend a lot of grace to them. Sometimes we're our own worst critics, right? So we need to be able to extend grace for our shortcomings as well, right? Which is not excusing them, is acknowledging and understanding that me, like any other human being, have good things, bad things, nobody's perfect. And, you know, frankly, you know, we need to understand that and work with it.